Welcome, this is RYEbenCb for Raise Your Edge, and I hope you have watched the first introduction video. This is the second one. I will explain you how to use the ranges. As you might have seen, there are quite a lot of ranges. I mean, due to the different stack sizes and so many positions. And I wanted to cover as much as possible. So there are quite some ranges for different scenarios: open raising, 3-betting, defending, and so on and so forth, blind battle. But I also wanted to keep it simple as possible. At first sight, they might look very overwhelming and very confusing, but in this video, I want to show you how you should use them, how you should read them, and how you should apply them, and what you should take into account when using those ranges. First of all, they're just an orientation. Don't see them as carved in stone. Always keep in mind you want to apply or execute flexible ranges. You want to adapt to your opponents. You want to adapt based on who's sitting behind. And this is something I'm going to teach you in the pre-flop section. So don't see them as fixed. Also later on, I'm going to lead you through some ranges. I'm going to show you exactly how to read them so that you are well prepared. So for example, I'm going to show you which hands you should defend against a 3-bet, which hands you should fold, and which hands you want to potentially 4-bet bluff. This is in situations where you play also against a good opponent, a regular that might also have a bluff 3-betting range. Hence, we also want to bluff 4-bet some hands. But against a recreational player, we don't want to do that. Most of the time, they're very value heavy, and when they 3-bet a shit hand like 6-5 suited, they want to see a flop. So you don't want to own yourself by 4-bet bluffing a fish. I mean, there are situations, but in general, you want to avoid those. Or you don't want to 3-bet polarized against the fish. That means you don't want to 3-bet either very strong hands or very weak hands. You want to 3-bet more a linear range. That means you want to 3-bet more value hands. So for example, against regular, in certain situations, you 3-bet for value jacks and ace queen and better, or 10s and ace queen and better. And as a bluff, you 3-bet 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited, 4-5 suited, 8-6 suited. So those kinds of ways. So either the bottom of your range or the top of your range. Everything in between, you're flatting. That means polarized, basically. Linear would mean against the fish that you also 3-bet hands like ace-jack suited, king-queen suited, king-queen off, king-jack suited. And this is an approach you should follow against the fish, because he's defending wider against your 3-bet. He likes to see flops. He likes to play more hands. So you don't want to bluff 3-bet him with weak holdings. No, you want to flat those hands, and you can be very unbalanced. So here, just based on this example, I want to show you how you should use those ranges. Again, against weaker opponents, play very exploitative. So the ranges are close to the optimal frequencies, yet here and there they're very exploitative because we need to consider certain population tendencies. There are situations where people are not bluffing as much, so we rather want to overfold a bit. Then there are certain situations where people just open raise too much, we want to bluff 3-bet more, and so on and so forth. Alright, so now I'm going to lead you through the ranges. First of all, it's very important that you know that those ranges count which are uploaded. You will see in the videos that here and there we might use, or I've used, different ranges. Since I always try to keep it as, try to keep it updated as much as possible, I'm also obviously going to change the ranges. So when you see this video here, there might already different ranges uploaded, yet they're always similar. We just make little adjustments, unless we have an epiphany or we find a mind-blowing new spot that is money printing. So we have to change the ranges tremendously. As long as that is not given, we are not changing that much. So yeah, basically when you will see that in the theory videos that there are different ranges, so don't be surprised. The concepts are always the same, the theories we're going to explain there, but the ranges you should play, download them. Don't make screenshots from the videos and use them for your game. Don't do this mistake. Those are more or less a little bit older, not updated. But the concepts we are explaining there are always the same. But for example, for those ranges here, I just recently made a database analysis also for the passive defending ranges. Hence, I needed to update the range. But you see, they're not completely different. For example, under the gun, we open raise a tiny bit looser compared to the ranges I'm presenting in the video. Also the same for the other ranges. So for example, MP and hijack. And here under the gun +2, you see that Jack 10 suited you're defending now only when you are in position. So you see the dark greens, you're calling 3-bet out of position. Jack 10 suited, additionally, you also call in position. It says call versus 3-bet, so you're calling always. The reason why you don't want to call it, let's say with less than 40 big blinds, I mean here you only call it when you have more than 40 big blinds. Very often bluff 3-betting ranges, especially against the earliest position, consists of hands like Queen 10, King 10 suited, Ace 10 suited, Ace 10 off, those kind of holdings. So even with Jack 10 suited, we are dominated by opponent's bluff. Against the latest early position, so under the gun +2 or middle position, people also start bluff 3-betting hands like 10-9 suited or 10-8 suited or 9-8 suited, more of those kind of hands. So with Jack 10 suited, we have a better overall equity. Yes, it's close, so it's kind of like the threshold, but under the gun +2, you should start calling those hands and not from earlier positions. With deeper stack sizes, 40 big blinds and 50 big blinds and more, there it's totally reasonable to call also hands like Queen Jack and Jack 10 suited, as well as 10-9 suited with more than 50 big blinds, because often enough we're gonna hit a very strong hand and then get a decent payout. But if you're not really sure and your opponent also is 3 more on the bigger side, so he's making 3.2x, you should fold those kind of holdings like 10-9 suited, Jack 10 suited, also from under the gun. Again, don't see them as carved in stone. You need to be able to make those little adjustments in game. It's just the fundament. Those are just the basic ranges. You need to be able to make the adjustment in game. They're the first step towards pre-flop greatness. Here you can see under the gun +2, it says 4-bet bluff, ace deuce to ace 5 suited. Those are basically just the potential 4-bet bluff candidates. Remember, I mean, with less than 50 big blinds, since you start 4-betting also queens, you can also 4-bet, let's say ace deuce to ace 5 suited. But the same should be here. If you just value 4-bet kings and aces, you can only pick a few combos of ace deuce to ace 5 suited. So maybe ace 5 suited, ace 4 and ace 3 suited. That's pretty much it. And again, you can use those ranges for 100 big blinds, 60 big blinds, 50 big blinds down to 40 big blinds. I'm also gonna add this as a side note so that you know, okay, with deeper stack size, those are the ranges we are playing. So the same we have for MP and hijack. Hijack is also known as MP +1. So you see that the later we sit, or the later our position, the more we defend against 3-bet, just because people's 3-bet range becomes weaker and weaker. They have more bluffs. So we can also start defending hands like ace 9 suited, Jack 10 suited, pocket 8. We can also go lighter broke. With less than 40 big blinds, we get it in with jacks. We 4-bet jam 10s and 9s with less than 30 big blinds, and so on and so forth. Again, if we have more than this threshold here, around 30 big blinds, we just call. It applies for every single position. And from MP, this is the first position where I would also start 4-bet bluffing here and there. I mean, you can also do it from under the gun with a few combos, that's totally reasonable. But against MP, especially from cutoff button, hijack, most of the people do have a bluff 3-betting range, not speaking about fish. So here, mix in some 4-bets. That's why it is so important to have Hold'em Manager 2 or Poker Tracker these days, so you can see what their 3-bet tendency is. If you play against someone really aggressive, the next candidates I would pick for bluff 4-betting are ace-6, ace-7, ace-8 suited, and then king-9, queen-9, jack-9 suited. So basically here, the top of my folding or the bottom of my calling range, because if called, they can still hit something. We still have reasonable high equity against the calling range. But if you play against a normal opponent, just do it with ace-2 to ace-5 suited. Hijack is a position where we open raise fairly loose. So here, it is totally reasonable to also fold hands like Jack-10, Queen-10 off or Ace-9 off when you realize that cutoff and button are very aggressive. But this is also something you're going to learn in the pre-flop course, where I'm going to teach you how to make the best adjustments possible. All right, so cutoff. This looks like a rainbow, but it is actually pretty simple to understand. Let's start with the suited aces. You can see they're all green. That means we always call in position. You see light green, call versus 3-bet in position. So when you face a 3-bet from small big blind, we always call suited aces. We only distinguish between out of position, in position. So we cutoff versus button, and the button 3-bets us with we're 4-bet bluffing ace-2 to ace-5 suited, cutoff versus button. And additionally, if we have less than 50 big blind, we also take ace-6 and ace-7 suited. Because with less than 50 big blinds, we also start value 4-betting queens, jacks, and ace-king. So we can have more 4-bet bluffs. As well as ace-10 offsuited. But ace-10 offsuited, I would just do it 50% of the time. Remember, offsuited combinations are always 12 combinations, whereas suited combinations are only 4 combinations. So you don't want to do it every single time. Doing it around 50% of the time with ace-10 off is a really good strategy. Also the same for 8-6, 5-4 suited when we face a 3-bet in position. So we are basically in position, then we call. If we're out of position, we just fold. Button, we are only in position, so this is a little bit easier. But basically the same concept here. Now we're in position, so we can easily flat all the suited aces and all those suited hands. If you want a 4-bet bluff, take suited kings or hands like queen jack or ace-9 off. So, they're one category, 4-bet bluffing, but if you play against a very aggressive opponent, queen jack, ace-9 off can also go additionally in your 4-bet bluffing range. Also, a hand like king-5 suited is reasonable, where you have a high card suited, so you can still make it a strong hand. Don't make it with a trash hand like ace-6 off or ace-4 off or 10-9 off or jack-6 suited. Don't spew it around. It doesn't bring you anywhere. Because the thing is, very often, those very aggressive opponents, they're also very sticky against 4-bets. So yes, you want to have some bluffs in your range, but usually you will make enough money with your value hands. All right, so now we have the small blind ranges, and there are 4 different ranges. Let's start with the small blind open raising ranges, and we have 4 different strategies. First of all, our open raise strategy, first against a tight opponent or good opponent. It's a raise only strategy. In general, a raise only strategy is not the best strategy. If your opponent's tight, he's overfolding, and here you should have the big blind fold versus small blind steal, and this should be more than 40%. If that is given, play a raise only strategy. You will automatically make so much money by just collecting the big blind 40% of the time, and most of the time you're also going to hit something post flop. You're not investing so much, and usually you just raise 3 times from the small blind, and with all the antes and the big blind and the small blind and all the dead money, you don't need to have that much success. So if it's over than 40%, raise your entire range. And obviously we also defend very tight against 3-bets, since we assume our opponent is tight. So this is a very exploitive strategy. He could easily, but since he's not doing it, bluff 3-bet the shit ton out of us. We're overfolding here, but we're just exploiting the fact that he's defending too little against small blind open raises. So we're also very careful once he 3-bets us. We just continue with fairly strong holdings. I really don't mind folding a queen jack off, or probably king jack or queen jack off, or something like 10-8 suited. So those hands that are very dominated against the big blind 3-bet. But in general, this is already a very tight range. So you're already exploiting him a lot. If he is someone who's really, really nitty, you can go even wider and open raise. Even has like 6-4 off, 5-4 off, any suited hand, any queen. If he folds more than 45 or 50% big blind versus small blind steals. This range on the right side, this is more or less a range when you don't feel comfortable playing post flop. Raise only strategies from the small blind, yes, they are possible, but they have one big disadvantage. You can't play as many hands as you actually want to play, because your big blind is in position. If he defends the right frequencies, you will have a lot of problems post flop. So you want to open raise fairly tight, so something around 45% from the small blind, or 50 or 40, something between 40-50%. So if you play against a good opponent and you don't want to play post flop that much, you can use this range. If you also feel comfortable playing post flop, I would always advise playing a mixed strategy, a mix from limp and open raise, and then you can easily play up to 80% of hands from the small blind. So here I'm also showing you which kind of hands you can 4-bet bluff, which hands you should 4-bet for value with certain stack sizes, which hands you should call against 3-bets, and which hands you should fold. So this is a raise only strategy against a decent opponent or someone who is defending reasonably big blind versus small blind. And against a reasonable opponent with less than 30 big blinds, you definitely want to 4-bet jam any pair. They're gonna have enough bluff 3-bets in their range in order for you to have a profitable 4-bet jam. So just close your eyes and click the all-in button. It's gonna be profitable. All right, the next one is the mixed strategy. So this is a mix of open raising, limping, limp 3-betting, limp folding, and so on and so forth. The only disadvantage for this strategy is that we might lose a little bit of value with our stronger holdings. But very often if we limp, he raises us, we can 3-bet, and there's still hands we're open raising. So the yellow ones we're open raising and calling as a 3-bet, and all those middle, like the orange hands you can see, so the middle in our range, we are limping because we cannot really call it 3-bet, so it would just be such a waste of equity to raise fold those hands, which is also an additional disadvantage for the raise only strategy. So we protect our equity. We're gonna see a flop by limping because we call a raise, and then the trashy hands we're just open raise folding. They have not so much equity, so the light blue hands, and the brown ones we are limp 3-bet bluffing, and our pink one we are limp 3-betting for value. That means we raise. If we raise, we either go all in with queens, kings, or aces, or we call his 4-bet and play post flop. If he's a nit, then you should open raise anyway your entire strategy, but regardless, those are the hands you want to 4-bet for value. If you want to avoid tricky situations and you limp and he raises and you want to re-raise, and then you face a 4-bet with, and you have king jack suited or ace jack, I don't mind folding. But in general, you definitely want to limp 3-bet king jack suited, ace jack suited, ace queen. They're just too strong blind versus blind. And your opponent, once he raises you, he's going to call many weaker hands you have dominated. You will raise all his hands like king 10, king 9, king 8 suited, queen jack, queen 10 suited, jack 10 suited, hands like jack 9 suited, and they can even have crap hands like 8, 6, 7, 5, 6, 4 suited. And against his value hands, 9s, 8s, 10s, suited aces, you still have good equity. Against someone who is loose passive, so a fish who's playing something like 40-20 or 43, so he has a high VPIP and a low PFR, this would be the perfect exploit. So we are open raising all our stronger hands. We're just going straight for value, and we are limping our weaker holdings, which also can call a raise, and we just limp folding the bottom. We don't expect him to raise that much, so we're gonna see many flops with our weaker holdings, but we don't want to raise a hand like 10-8 off or Jack-8 suited when we don't expect having so much fold equity pre-flop anyway. But since he's a recreational player or he's very weak, he's not having a balanced raising range against our small blind limp. He's also probably not having a wide bluff 3-betting range, so we can just easily raise a lot of hands for value. So even a hand like King-8 suited, because the value comes from him calling just too wide, we dominate and we are ahead against his calling range, and then we just play simple, straightforward power poker. That's pretty much it. So it's the good ABC style, raise your stronger hands and yeah, limp or play a bit more cautiously with your weaker holdings against recreation player. This is the good old style, and this is the style you should have in your repertoire when facing those opponents. So small blind, you need to know those 4 different strategies, and depending what opponent you're playing against, you want to use either of these strategies. Or one of these strategies in order to be best prepared. If you play against an unknown, I would always go for the mixed strategy against a good opponent. Then we have the big blind versus the small blind limp range. So we're in the big blind, we face a small blind limp here. You have the ranges for 15 to 20 big blinds, for 20 to 25 big blinds. Again, if you play against the fish, I wouldn't raise those yellow hands. I would just raise straight for value. I'm not having a bluffing range. So this is when you play against regular, who's also limp folding reasonably, and you also want to have some bluffs in your range. So here you can see 9-5 off, 60% of the time you want to check it, 40% of the time you want to raise. So here I'm showing you which kind of hands you want to raise. You don't want to raise all of them. Most of the hands you want to raise are 6-4 suited, 6-5 off, 4-5 off, 5-3 suited, 4-3 suited. Then in a very high frequencies, those kind of hands like 6 deuce, 5 deuce, 4 deuce, 3 deuce suited. And then we are kind of balanced automatically. 8-6, 8-5, 7-5 suited are fairly high equity hands. So we rather want to check it back, but you can throw in some raises, and you should do that. Like every 3rd time or 4th time raising with 8-6 suited. I mean, you don't need to count it. Don't get me wrong. You don't need to count, okay, now I've been checking 8-6 suited and you write notes. No, just know here and there, throw in some raise with 8-6 suited. Most of the time you want to raise with a hand like 6-4 suited, and then you're going to be in the right frequency. So don't worry. You can also do it like this, that you say, I'm going to raise 7-6 off every single time. Therefore I check back 9-5 off. But this would be a little bit easier. I could have also done this way, but this is a little bit better for you to have the best board protection possible. So you have enough hands also on low boards when you check back. You cover also enough low boards, so boards like 3-4-5, 3-5-7, 3-4-8. You're gonna have enough hands on these kind of board texture in your check back range, and also when you raise. Your board on Broadway boards and ace high boards, you're also gonna have enough hands when you ISO raise, so that is not a problem. And since we are only 15 to 20 big blinds, you can easily jam all the suited aces. Also against regulars, it's very profitable to jam hands like 5-4, 6-4, 5, 7-6, 8-7 suited to go all in with those hands. Against the fish, I wouldn't do that. I would just play post flop and check back. So here, those kind of plays where we do have some bluffs, don't do them against fish. I can't repeat it often enough. So against 20 to 25 big blinds, we go less all in, we raise more, and you might ask, okay, why do we raise for the hand like King 10 suited? Why not just checking bet? Yes, that it would suck when you have to raise fold, but the thing is, he will call so many weaker hands against your raise. I mean, he's doing it with an intention to limp. That means he has a limp call range, and most people limp call 30-40% of the time, even more. And those hands, most of the time, you have dominated, or you're ahead. So the value just comes from him calling. That's why you want to raise. When you face a jam, yeah, you have to fold. That sucks, but Most of the time, there's a strategy that has a lot of benefits, but there's still a few disadvantages. So there's very rarely a strategy that is perfect, that only has advantages. So we want to play those strategies who have the highest EVs. And when we are deeper, 30 big blinds, 40 big blinds, 60 big blinds, 100 big blinds, this is our range here. Remember, and you will also see it in the core rejam or rejam ranges, when you have 30, 40 big blinds or less than 50 big blinds, you can always go broke. So let's say you ISO raise 10s and he 4-bets on you, you can go all in with 10s and jacks. With more than 50 big blinds, I would just call and play post flop. Same for ace queen. So ace queen, jacks and 10s, go broke when you have less than 50 big blinds, and just call it when you have more than 50 big blinds. Most of the time, it's going to be the right play. If you feel very comfortable playing post flop, you can also just call with ace queen 40 or 45 big blinds. That's totally reasonable. If we face a jam, let's say we have 35 big blinds and he limp jams, or we have 30 big blinds, I mean, the hands we're going broke with are basically 7s and ace jack suited, and an ace jack and better. I wouldn't call it any loser. Yeah, and if you're playing against a very tight opponent and he's limp 3-betting you, it's totally reasonable to let go of hands like king 8 suited, 6-5, 7-6 suited, queen 9 suited, 9-8 suited, those kind of bottom hands. You can fold. Here you need to be able to make the adjustments for yourself. So here we have the ranges for around 25 big blinds, so they apply for 30 big blinds, 20 big blinds, so everything that is around this stack size, so that you have an idea what to play. They're a little bit easier. You see which hands you can call against a 3-bet, you can see which hands you should go 4-bet, or you should go all in with, and which hands you should fold against a 3-bet. You have it for every single position, so not something very spectacular. As you can see, also now we start open raising tighter. That's due to the fact that people can go lighter broke against our stack size, so there you need to be a little bit more careful. Same for MP and hijack. Cutoff also now a little bit more on the tighter side. Button, it's also a little bit more on the looser side. And this is something you want to learn in the core rejam and core resteal and resteal course, where I'm going to teach you, if you have the entire package, which kind of open raising frequencies you should aim to play. Because if you open raise too much, apparently your opponents in the blinds, they can rejam very, very loose against you. Here also, when the fish is 3-betting you, just fold hands like deuces to 7s or 8s. Just play your value hands, 9s and ace queen or ace jack. Go with these kind of hands all in. Even when ace jack is close, just call it and play post flop. The same, or when you think he's just too tight, just call and play post flop, even with 9s and 8s. And usually when recreation player 3-betting, I mean, they're capable of overplaying a hand like 7s and 8s, so I wouldn't fold 8s and 9s probably, but or a hand like ace 10, ace 9 suited, or king queen, king jack, so you still have reasonable equity. And here and there they might have a bluff, but you shouldn't 4-bet jam deuces to 6s or 7s here against recreational player. But I think I already mentioned it often now, but it's really important. Here also an alternative, you can play from the button if the blinds are very aggressive. So you start playing a limping strategy. So basically all those hands you have to raise forward, but have very high equity. We're gonna put on our limping range and then we call a raise. The green ones are raise folds and the dark reds are limp folds. And every single time we play a limping range, we can automatically play more hands because we invest less. When we invest less, we can play more hands, as easy as that. Additionally, ace king and ace queen suited, in order to balance our range a bit, we also have in our limp jamming range. If you want to be trappy, you can also just limp call aces and play post flop. And when our opponents are aggressive, every single time with 20, I wouldn't do it with more than 25 big blinds, But if you have less than 25 big blinds, hands like ace 8, ace 7, ace 6, ace 10 off, ace 9, and all the low pockets are very profitable jams. So you can also go all in with those hands and take down the pot most of the time. So this is a perfect adjustment against very aggressive opponents. Here we have a small blind mix strategy for 25 big blinds. So here we're limping a lot of hands, want to play post flop and play as many hands as possible. If we would just play open raise only strategy, we are allowed only to raise only 40%. Otherwise, our opponent can just rejam basically 100% of hands, and you would have a very proper rejam. Deuces to fives are in my limp jamming range. You can also put it in your open raising range or even in your open jamming range with 20-25 big blinds. That is totally reasonable. But when you feel someone is open raising a lot, those kind of hands are really, really good in your limp jamming range. The brown ones are open raise fold. You can also see a few limp 3-bet bluffs and our limp 3-bet for value. King queen suited most of the time, 20-25 big blind. Yes, when we limp 3-bet and we face a jam, we also have to go broke. So these kind of ranges you can use when you have 20, 25, or around 30, 35 big blinds. So basically you're in this short stack region. All right, then we have flatting and 3-betting with several stack sizes. So we have it once for 30 big blinds and more, for 40 big blinds and more, and 50 big blinds and more. So basically the 30 big blinds and more ranges are when you're between 30 and 40 big blinds. Then we have it also for 20 big blinds. You use it when you have between 20 and 30 big blinds. And the ranges are based on around 2.3, 2.4, 2.5x open raise. So if someone is going bigger than that, be tighter. If someone is raising smaller than that, you can here and there add more hands. I'm not going through any single range because this would just take too long. Again, we have it for most of the positions for 20, 30, 40, 50 and more big blinds. I'm just going to do it for 50 big blinds and more just to show it really quick. So here additionally you see those light blues. Those hands are reasonable to flat if the table is soft, if you have 1 or 2 fish sitting behind, and it's very likely that they will come along and join the pot. So you want to play poker against those type of players because they're going to make the most mistakes. That's why you want to increase your flatting range. If you just have better opponents sitting behind, you want to more, 3-bet more and don't flat so much. So those light blues are showing you those hands you should flat call the weaker the opponents are, which are sitting behind. Here I'm advising with queens, kings, and aces. Once you 3-bet and you face a 4-bet, you just want to call. The thing is, especially from under the gun MP, when you face a 4-bet and you have kings and queens, most of the time they're doing it either with bluffs or aces. So it doesn't really make sense to 5-bet or to go all in. You're just isolating yourself against aces or a better hand, and you're making his bluffs to fold. So just call, play in position, and keep his range wide. You can also do that with aces. And since people are not really 4-betting queens, they only have kings or bluffs. And especially when like 60, 70, 80 big blinds, they're not really 4-betting ace-king from under the gun. They're just calling and play post-flop. So for that reason, it's only kings and bluffs. So since kings are only 6 combos, it's more likely that your opponent has a bluff. So just call and let them hang himself. By calling your entire range, your range basically is very disguised and your opponent cannot put you on exact hands. The cutoff, you see that if we have more than 75 big blinds, we call ace-king and then we just call a 4-bet. If we have less than 75 big blinds, it's reasonable to go broke on just to 5-bet all in. Because cutoff is a position our opponent can think, yeah, we just cut off, we're late position, we're just 3-betting line. And these kind of positions, or against these kind of position, people also start 4-bet bluffing more frequently. Then it becomes more profitable to go all in with those hands. Yet I would advise try to keep the variance as low as possible. And even with 70, 60, 50 big blinds, I would just call with ace king and go broke with less than 50 big blinds. But it's definitely profitable. So here, but I feel very confident playing post flop. If you also feel confident playing post flop and you give yourself an edge over the field or over your opponent, then just call it. Or if you have a soft table and you don't want to go all in pre-flop with a marginal holding, then just call the 4-bet with more than 50 big blinds and play post-flop. Then we have the range for the button. You can see the button we can flat call fairly wide. The yellows are bluff 3-bets. The deeper you are, the less you should bluff 3-bet because you don't have that many value 3-bets. But generally here also ace deuce to ace 5 suited, these kind of hands, and 8-9, 8-7 suited, those are very good bluff 3-bets. Also in the blinds, if there's one fish, you should also flat hands like 8-6 suited, 7-4, 5 suited, queen 8, jack 8, king 8 suited. Again, if they're just regulars, definitely fold those hands. Same should be here with ace king and queens. In general, I would advise to go broke with less than 50 big blinds, yet it's definitely profitable to do that with less than 75 big blinds. Here, same with small blind as well. The thing here, the difference is that we're going to play out of position. So when we threw it from the small blind, we face 4-bet, it's going to be dicey. But yes, there are nasty spots and we cannot avoid them. Just call, play some post flop, and if your opponent gives you a lot of action, he probably has aces and kings, and then you can make hero fours. So again, don't take those ranges for granted. You need to make those adjustments. I'm giving here the advices how you can even maximize your profit by playing a little bit more post flop rather than just getting it in every single time post flop when you have ace, king, and queens. Avoiding setups is a skill you need to have in order to become a very, very successful poker player. That doesn't mean that you should make crazy folds, but when you feel you're behind, then make a good laydown. Most of the time you're going to be right. Here in those flatting ranges, we're not covering every single position against every single position. So here versus MP, we're just having button and small blind versus MP, and I mean cutoff is similar. You just become a bit tighter. You just fold hands like a6, a7 suited, just become 10%, let's say 10 to 20% tighter, and then you're already making the right adjustment. But otherwise, there would just be too many ranges. And you can also see based on other ranges where we have cutoff versus MP, how you should approach cutoff versus MP. And one way to approach it is just get one hand tighter in each hand category. So let's say I fold 6-5 suited, I fold some of the weakest pockets. I mean, with 50 big blinds more, you can still call any pocket, but I would definitely fold something like 6-5 suited. I would fold hands like ace-6, ace-7 suited, or 3-bet them rather than flatting, and fold a hand like ace-10 off for sure, and pick king 9, queen 9, jack 9 suited rather as a 3-bet, because there's 3 players left to act who can wake up with a hand and squeeze against you. So just fold a few more hands that earlier you sit. Small blind, there are different options possible. As you might have heard, there are players who 3-bet their entire range, then there's some playing mixed strategy. There are a few options possible. And if the big blind is a fish, you want to lean more towards calling. If the big blind is reg, you want to lean more towards 3-betting. If your opponent is open raising more on the bigger side, you also want to lean more towards 3-betting. Those are the indicators that decide what strategy you should execute. This is a more easier strategy. It's totally reasonable also to 3-bet all your suited broadways, and then continuing against the 4-bet with king, queen, king, jack, ace, jack suited. It's also reasonable just to call a little bit, play a little bit more lower variance. But from the small blind, this is a position where it is up to you. If you already have a very well developed strategy and you feel comfortable playing it, go for it. As you can see here, playing a more mixed strategy, 9-8 suited, ace-5 suited, ace-queen, ace-jack over hands, I'm always 3-betting. Also, hands like 10-9 suited and jack-10 suited are very good bluffs. And then mixing in some calls with king-queen, king-jack, queen-jack, king-10, queen-10 suited, and so on and so forth. If you don't have, if you have a regular in the big blind, it's totally reasonable also to 3-bet the suited aces. But again, we're playing against MP. It's still, it's still quite a strong position, so you don't want to bluff that much. You don't have that many value hands. You just basically you're 3-betting jacks and ace queen, so you can't go totally crazy. If you see someone is opening too much, let's say more than 25%, also his 4 to 3-bet is reasonably high, so let's say more than 55%. 3-bet any suited ace, 3-bet those suited connectors, king 9, queen 9, jack 9, 10-9 suited, totally fine. So, but you need to know those numbers, which I'm also going to show you in the preflop course, numbers you can hold on to when someone is opening too much, what your strategy should be, and so on and so forth. All right, this is button versus cutoff. No, sorry, yeah, button versus cutoff, small blind versus cutoff. And as you can see from the button, we're playing a fairly large amount of hands. The yellows are all our 3-bet bluff hands. We're also 3-betting reasonably wide for value. Tens is a hand you can definitely, you should definitely 3-bet for value. You shouldn't go broke. You should just call a 4-bet, but button versus cutoff is a position where people definitely can have a wide bluffing range. So it's totally reasonable to go broke with 75 big blinds and less. Ace queen off, ace queen suited, I would just call against the 4-bet though, and just go broke with ace king and jacks, or even jacks is fine, but queens and ace king, button versus cutoff, 75 big blinds, you should definitely just get it in. Jacks and ace queen is fine to go broke with less than 50 big blinds, but when you have more than 75 big blinds, you should definitely call those hands. And even with queens, I would just call, and I would just go broke with kings and aces and probably just jam ace king. Small versus cutoff, as you can see here, now we also bluff 3-betting more now, and yeah, same should be here with our value hands. Nines, you can also 3-bet for value, button versus cutoff, and then call a 4-bet. Yeah, 10s and 9s, so yeah, totally fine to 3-bet for value. I would also lean more towards 3-betting for value. What to defend, what to flat call from the big blind. There's going to be an extra folder where you find all the passive defending ranges from the big blind. We have made some very, very detailed analysis, what kind of hands are profitable to defend against certain positions by considering the equity realization factors. Also, what kind of hands to bluff 3-bet. So you will find everything there. So what I've showed you here, you're going to have the same for 40 to 50 big blinds, 30 to 40 big blinds, and 20 to 30 big blinds. And then I think you're going to be very, very well prepared, and you're going to know what hands to defend, what hands to 3-bet, when to go broke. So here, please also write down what I just said about certain hands, that you should rather call certain hands with a certain stack size rather than going broke with those kind of hands. So and yeah, better play post flop. So those additional information are really important. So that's why I'm making this video here. So use those ranges with the information I give here, and then I think that is the best way you will get the most value out of these ranges. You also might find in the 20 big blind, or the ranges for 20, 30, 40 big blind versus the big blind defending ranges. I just made it for completeness, but they might not be accurate. So the real defending ranges you're gonna find in the passive defending folder. So take those when it comes to defending passively from the big blind. All right, let's do the rejamming ranges. I think they should also be quite self-explaining. I'm showing you let me really quick. I made all of those ranges based on the holding resource calculator, so I checked them which hands are profitable. So all hands I'm showing you here, they are decently profitable. I didn't put any marginal rejams into these ranges, so you can be really sure that a hand that is in this range is going to be a profitable rejam against the population apparently. And rejamming is always less than 30 big blinds. 3-bet call, we are 3-bet calling for induce, so we want to also make our opponent, we want to induce him to make a mistake, that he 4-bet jams a hand he would have folded against our all-in. So most of the time with ace, king, and jacks, we're 3-betting if we have less than 30 big blinds, and then we call an all-in. If we have less than 20 big blinds, or less than 25 big blinds, just go all-in with ace, king, and jacks. Most of the time, unless you're in position, cut a button versus cut off or button versus hijack and you want to use something. As you can see, under the gun versus under the gun +1, even a hand like ace queen off, I mean with 30 big blinds, it's always going to be a profitable rejam. You can also flat. Here it's up to you. Do you feel comfortable playing those kind of hands post flop? Same with 10s, 9s. They have both relatively same value in flatting and in rejam. The merits for both. So here it's up to you. And then you can see we have to rejam. Sorry, it's button versus under the gun. Yeah. So my mistake here. So as you can see, ace queen always a proper rejam. Up to you. You can also flat. Same for 10s and 9s. I would slightly lean more towards flatting and play post flop. Same with king queen suited for 20 big blinds, but again, very reasonable, very profitable rejam. The same with the pocket pairs. And here, this is for big blind versus hijack and cutoff. And you see that some of the hands like ace 5 off are not fully colored or fully painted with blue. That basically means you can flat or rejam. So they're both relatively profitable. So here it is really up to you. Especially with 15 big blinds, since the playability for ace 5 and ace 8 off is quite low, I would lean more towards rejamming. And this explanation always stands for less than 30 big blinds. So if you have less than 30 big blinds, you can start rejamming, for example, deuces to 9s, big blind versus hijack. Then we have our passive defending ranges. We have it against certain open raise frequencies. So it's 12%, 50%, those are basically against under the gun. We always assume our opponent open raise 2.5x, so if someone is min raising, you should defend wider. Against the 20% range, which is more or less an MP range, 25% also MP, 30% is against cutoff, 35% is also more like cutoff, but a very loose cutoff range. 40% is basically and 40, 45, 50% are button. Also the bluff 3-bets and our value 3-bets. This should be very self-explaining. And then we have the pushing ranges for 10 big blinds from every single position and the call rejams. When you open raise and you face a rejam, what do you do with certain hands? But they're also very self-explaining. There's nothing so special. If you have a question, you can ask in our Discord group. When you are owner of the full program, for the full package, Start Crushing, we have a VIP Discord group. You can ask me there, or you can ask the coaches there, and we will always answer your questions. Also, share your progress with us, share your stories. We're always interested. That's why we have the group for. So make it count. That was RYEbenCb for Raise Your Edge. See you soon, guys. Bye bye.